The dust tasted like ash and regret. It clung to the back of my throat, a gritty reminder of the day's symphony of destruction. The sun, a malevolent eye in the bruised purple sky, bled its final rays across the ravaged landscape. Another patrol, another IED, another young man ripped apart by a war he barely understood. His name was Private Miller, but all I saw was a constellation of crimson blooming on the desert floor. I knelt beside him, my hands moving on autopilot, a macabre dance I knew all too well. The rhythmic hiss of the oxygen mask, the frantic beep of the heart monitor, a desperate chorus against the backdrop of distant gunfire. He was fading fast, the light in his eyes flickering like a dying ember. And all I could do was hold his hand and whisper promises I wasn't sure I could keep. The air thrummed with the unseen energy of violence, a palpable tension that vibrated in my bones. It was a feeling I'd become intimately familiar with, a sixth sense honed by years of patching up broken bodies in a world determined to break them further. But amidst the chaos, amidst the fear and the fury, there was always a flicker of something else, a spark of hope, a stubborn refusal to surrender. It was in the way a soldier would clutch a photograph of his family, in the whispered prayer before a mission, in the shared cigarette under the desolate stars. It was the quiet defiance of the human spirit against the overwhelming tide of despair. And it was my job to protect that spark, to fan the flames of resilience until they burned bright enough to guide us all home. Tonight, though, the darkness felt heavier. The silence between the bursts of gunfire stretched on, thick and suffocating, amplifying the hollow echo in my chest. I felt like a lone lighthouse keeper battling against a storm that threatened to engulf everything. The faces of the fallen swam before my eyes, a haunting gallery of lost innocence, each one a searing brand on my soul. The weight of their absence pressed down on me, a crushing burden that threatened to buckle my knees. Tonight, the war felt personal. The scent of antiseptic always brought her back. Not to this desolate, war-torn landscape, but to the sterile, brightly lit hallways of St. Jude's. The memory was sharp, almost painful in its clarity, the squeak of her rubber-soled shoes on the polished linoleum, the hushed whispers of nurses, the rhythmic beeping of machines monitoring fragile lives. My mother, a warrior in her own right, navigated those hallways with a quiet grace, her hands now gnarled with arthritis, then smooth and strong, offering comfort and care to children battling diseases that stole their laughter and dreams. She was a nurse, a healer, a beacon of hope in a place often shrouded in despair. I remember the day I decided to follow in her footsteps. I was 8 years old, visiting her at the hospital. A young boy, no older than 5, lay in a bed, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with a fear that mirrored the vastness of the universe. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand, her voice a gentle murmur as she read him a story about a brave knight who slayed a dragon. I watched, mesmerized, as the boy's fear slowly melted away, replaced by a flicker of wonder, a spark of hope. In that moment, I understood the power of healing, the profound impact one person could have on another. It wasn't just about mending broken bodies, it was about mending broken spirits. She never pushed me, never pressured me, but I saw the pride in her eyes when I told her I wanted to be a doctor, a healer like her. She taught me the importance of empathy, the power of listening, the sacred responsibility of caring for another human being. She showed me that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found, a reason to keep fighting. And when I decided to join the Army, to become a combat medic, she didn't try to dissuade me. She knew that my path, like hers, was one of service, of dedication, of unwavering commitment to healing. She simply held me close and whispered, "Be brave, my son, and never forget why you do what you do." Her words, a lifeline in the storm, echoed in my ears as I knelt beside Private Miller, desperately trying to hold on to that light, that flicker of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. But as I treated a soldier with a shrapnel wound to his leg, the image of the burning Humvee seared itself into my mind, the screams of the dying echoing in my ears. The faces of those men, their laughter, their fears, flashed before my eyes. I knew in that moment that things would never be the same. Something had broken inside me, something irreparable. The rest of the deployment was a blur of blood and fire, of desperate attempts to save lives that were often beyond saving. Each casualty chipped away at my soul, leaving me hollow and empty. I became a machine, going through the motions, detached from the horror around me. The laughter was gone, replaced by a grim determination to survive. The ringing phone jolted me awake. I fumbled for it on the nightstand, my heart pounding in my chest. It was 3 a.m. Who would be calling at this hour? "Hello?" I croaked, my voice thick with sleep. "Doc, it's Sarah." Her voice was tight, strained. Sarah was Sergeant Miller's wife. My stomach clenched. "Sarah, what's wrong?" A sob caught in her throat. He's gone, Doc. He took his own life." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Miller, gone. The man who'd held it together when everything was falling apart. The man who'd barked orders through the chaos, who'd kept us alive. Gone. I sat up in bed, my mind reeling. The images flooded back, unbidden. The burning Humvee, the screams, the faces of the dead. Miller's face, blackened with soot, his eyes filled with a haunted look I hadn't understood at the time. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "He never came back, Doc," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "He was here, but he wasn't really here. The war, it took him piece by piece, and in the end, there was nothing left." The silence stretched between us, heavy with grief and unspoken truths. I knew what she meant. The war had taken something from all of us. Some lost limbs, others lost their minds, and some, like Miller, lost their souls. Now, years later, I still wake up screaming from nightmares I can't quite remember, but feel deeply in my bones. The smell of diesel fuel triggers panic attacks. A sudden loud noise sends me scrambling for cover. I avoid crowds, distrust strangers, and find myself constantly scanning for threats that aren't there. The hypervigilance is a constant companion, a shadow that follows me everywhere. I flinch at sudden touches, struggle to maintain eye contact, and find myself withdrawing from the world, isolating myself in my own private hell. I tried therapy, of course. The therapist listened patiently as I recounted my experiences, nodded sympathetically, and offered coping mechanisms. But the words felt hollow, inadequate. How could anyone who hadn't been there, who hadn't seen what I'd seen, truly understand? How could they comprehend the weight of the dead, the burden of guilt, the profound sense of loss that gnawed at my soul? I'm a doctor, trained to heal. But how do you heal wounds that are invisible, wounds that fester deep within the mind? How do you repair a soul that has been shattered into a million pieces? I save lives, that's what I do, but the lives I couldn't save haunt me still. They whisper in my dreams, their faces accusing, their voices filled with pain. They remind me of my failures, of the lives I couldn't protect, of the promises I couldn't keep. The dust settled, both literally and figuratively. The ringing in my ears faded, replaced by the chirping of unseen crickets, a sound incongruously peaceful against the backdrop of devastation. The sun bled crimson onto the horizon, painting the ravaged landscape in hues of fire and blood. I knelt beside Ben, his chest rising and falling with a slow, deliberate rhythm that was music to my ears. The bleeding had stopped, the IV drip a lifeline tethering him to this world. He stirred, his eyelids fluttering like trapped moths. "Doc," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "I'm here, Ben. You're safe now. Just rest." He tried to focus, his gaze unfocused and distant. "The girl? The little girl? Did we?" The image of the child, her small hand reaching for her mother, flashed before my eyes. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "She's with her mother now, Ben. They're both safe." A half-truth, a necessary kindness in the face of unbearable reality. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. We try so hard." I squeezed his hand, offering silent comfort. "You did good, Ben. You did more than good. You saved lives today." The weight of the day descended upon me, crushing me beneath its immensity. The faces of the fallen, the screams of the wounded, the relentless, deafening roar of war, all swirling within me, threatening to consume me whole. I closed my eyes, drawing upon some hidden reserve of strength, some primal instinct to survive, to keep going. Later, as the medevac helicopter throbbed against the night sky, carrying Ben away to a field hospital, I stood alone amidst the wreckage. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and death, a pungent reminder of the fragility of life. I looked down at my hands, stained with blood, and saw not just the carnage of war, but also the indelible mark of humanity. These hands had held life, had fought for life, had brought solace in the face of despair. They were the hands of a healer, a warrior, a survivor. I remembered the words of my grandfather, a veteran of a different war, a different time. The true measure of a man is not how he dies, but how he lives. He had also said, sometimes the only victory is survival. The helicopter disappeared into the distance, its fading lights a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. I knew that more battles lay ahead, more lives to save, more horrors to face. But I also knew that within me, deep down, resided an unyielding spirit, a refusal to surrender to the darkness. I was a combat medic, a guardian of life in the heart of death. And I would keep fighting, keep healing, keep hoping, until the very end. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the wind through the shattered trees. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that held the weight of untold stories, a silence that demanded to be filled with purpose. I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs, and turned towards the east, where the first faint glimmer of dawn was beginning to break. A new day was coming, a new battle to be fought, and I would be ready.